Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the FantasyPros Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Harris. You can find me on Twitter at DanHarris80. It's the Sunday night recap show, but it is not the typical version because filling in for the under the weather Mike Tagliere is none other than Kyle Yates. You can find him on Twitter at KyNFL Yates. Thank you for being taking one for the team, stepping up for Tags, who faked an illness so he could take the night off. I appreciate it. How you doing?
I'm good, man. No, I mean, Tags has stepped up for me this season. We're a team. We got each other's backs. Happy to do so. I'm excited to talk some football with you, man. I had to talk about this right before we get going. I was going to ask how you're doing because you nearly, obviously, our 230 million podcast listeners know that you're a diehard Jets fan. You nearly lost Trevor Lawrence there. How are you doing?
Yeah. We'll get into it. But it was some tough going there. It was some tough going. I mean, you had a tough one too, but with your Bears. Yeah. But I guess the best thing I could say is that our faithful listeners, right? They've been grinding it out for pretty much their entire fantasy league, right? They must be tired. Their tanks on nearly empty, and when they think that way, I do want them to think about the Jets and the commitment level that it takes to look at your franchise history and think to yourself, we can do worse. We can make 0-16 happy. Don't try to give us the game. We're not going to take it. When you're getting that fantasy football championship, when you're looking for that, when you're trying to see, do I have the dedication to get there? Look at the Jets' 2020 season and learn finally what true commitment really means. Because that's not a normal loss, Yates. That's we've got to figure out a way to lose this game, and they did. Kudos to them. So I'm excited. I'm so ready to get into it. Before we get going, though, remind you about our giveaway, James Robinson signed helmet. You can enter our contest by leaving a review for the show on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, and then going to fantasypros.com/contest to submit that review. That's all. James Robinson signed helmet. Go get one. And again, I do not have the winner yet of the last one. I'm the worst person. I'm trying. We will get it. We will announce it. I promise. All right, Yates, you may be unfamiliar with the show, okay, because this is your first time. We start with a little something called Trust or Bust, in which I'm going to name a player, and I'm going to ask you whether or not you trust them or whether you think they're a bust. We were going to start this week with Keke Coutee. 9 targets, 8 catches, 141 yards against the Colts. The Bears next, but there are not many options in that passing game. Trust or bust, Keke Coutee?
I'm going to trust him. I said going into this week that I was like, I don't think we can play Keke Coutee in our fantasy lineups this week. But I said that I was intrigued. Like, I wanted to watch this because, again, you look at, I've never seen a wide receiver room dry up more quickly than this room here, especially when we thought that Brandon Cooks was done. Like, he returned, he dealt with a concussion, he returned, or was being evaluated for a concussion, excuse me.
Right.
He returned to that game, and I was like, Keke Coutee went from being the 5th wide receiver on this depth chart 3 weeks ago to now the number 1 option. So I think looking at this offense, the ball, we say it all the time, the ball has to go somewhere. And if that's the case, Keke Coutee, I mean, he's always been able to perform in spurts. I don't know if it was Bill O'Brien that just did not like him. He's got a fumbling issue. He's got health issues, of course. But I'm going to say, like, we can trust him as a flex option at least. I'm not willing to go all the way up to a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 or anything. But as a flex option, he can bring some upside to your lineup.
I think that's about right. I think a flex option is around where we're going to rank him, even in a tough matchup. I mean, yeah, the ball's got to go somewhere in this offense. And, we did see Duke Johnson, as you noted in our private Slack sort of message with Tags. Duke Johnson did get some targets. Great day. But it's got to go somewhere. Yeah, I think that's where we are. I mean, I agree outside the wide receiver 3 range. But as a flex, yeah, I mean, if you're going to get the targets, and I think he will going forward, you are someone that fantasy managers, even as we head into the playoffs, might be able to quasi-rely on. How about Mike Gesicki? 10 targets, 9 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown. He caught a touchdown last week, too. We've got Tua back, so factor that in. But good game here for Gesicki. Trust or bust, Mike Gesicki.
I mean, it's more so to do with the tight end position that I'm going to trust him. I think, we have to talk about his catch that he reeled in. One-handed was beautiful. And so, he's always had the talent. He's always had the athleticism. It's been about putting it together on the football field. And now we're starting to see that. The concern was, okay, what's he going to do with Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback? And we just saw that he put together a solid performance. So, yeah, I think you can continue to view him as a low-end tight end 1. I'm not going to put him up into the top 5 or anything like that, but yet, you can absolutely trust him moving forward. And it's more so to do just based on the tight end position.
Right. There are no busts, I think, when we're talking about the tight end position, right? Because we just are going to
There's no one in the top tier.
There's no one in the top tier. So he is, quote unquote, trust for as much as you can with a tight end. All right. The next one is what's your problem, man? Now, this one is a fan favorite, and usually I yell at Tags about his rest of season rankings. The thing is, Yates, you're filling in. A, I would feel bad if I was going to come in here and yell at you about your rest of season rankings coming in. B, I do not have it set up so I can immediately see exactly what the difference is between our rankings and pick out where I was right and you were wrong. But there is one player that we discussed early on in the season that I yelled at you about. You were like, this player, just get rid of him, never consider him for fantasy. And it only took, the vast majority of the season. But I'm clearly proven right on T.Y. Hilton. 11 targets, 8 catches, 110 yards, and the touchdown. Last week, 4 catches, 81 yards, and the touchdown. Again, I remember what you said. If you roster T.Y. Hilton ever on your fantasy team this season, you should not be playing fantasy football. So, I mean, I made that up, but it's my show. So what do you... what do you think here, Yates? Because, I mean, Pittman, obviously, we'll talk about him in a little bit. He had just 5 targets, caught all of them. But Hilton, at this point, is producing. Is this somebody that fantasy managers can rely on going forward?
Well, looking at this specific matchup, you said that, okay, him lining up against in the slot, Vernon Hargreaves, like this is a fantastic mismatch. Like, he should be able to at least produce. And that's why, I mean, when we went back to what podcast was that, our start sit this week that I said, like, or no, that was the Friday show. Like, I was the higher man on T.Y. Hilton than you. You had him down at 52. I had him at 40 on the week. And I was like, that's gross. Like, I want to throw up.
To be fair, I did move him up after we talk. And by the way, that is what we do. And the three of us kind of talk about that. Sometimes we bring up points and we're like, I got to take a closer look at this person. And I did. And I did move him up, to be fair. But yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the matchup, you were saying, like, okay, he should be able to produce. Like, he should be able to have a solid game here. Now, I wasn't expecting 100-plus yards. But I think that's kind of the argument. Like, in plus matchups, you can absolutely look his way. But then you look at the rest of the season schedule for the Colts and you go, okay, those are some plus matchups. You can absolutely continue to look T.Y. Hilton's way. So he's in kind of that same tier as Keke Coutee of what we talked about, like solid flex play. He brings you some upside when he's in those plus matchups.
Yeah, that is the reality of what we are. And I mean, there are leagues where I rostered T.Y. Hilton, where I held him all year, mostly because there just wasn't anything out there.
It was mostly just to spite me, wasn't it?
It was in the 1% chance that this could happen. I held on to him just for the odd chance that maybe you would appear on this podcast.
Yes, exactly. It's all coming together.
All right, let's get into the games. Yates. Saints 21, Falcons 16. I mean, it's getting boring here because we just know exactly what we're going to get from Taysom Hill. 2 passing touchdowns, 1 to Traquan Smith and 1 to Jared Cook. That's just what we all knew was going to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
He does add 83 yards rushing. There is this report out there that came out earlier today that Drew Brees could return for Week 14. Still sounds more likely Week 15. Let's assume, though, that we're getting one more week of Taysom Hill here as quarterback next week against Philadelphia. Are your fears calmed about Alvin Kamara? Just 3 targets, 2 catches, 9 yards, but he does have 15 carries, 88 yards. And the score on the ground, Latavius Murray was barely involved. So, are you feeling better about Alvin Kamara so long as Taysom Hill is the quarterback?
Yeah, it was kind of, I put out on Twitter earlier today, I was like, guys, Alvin Kamara caught a pass, and then he caught another one. It was like, all right, let's all celebrate. Yeah, I think moving forward, we can't expect the type of volume that we were seeing from Alvin Kamara if Taysom Hill remains the quarterback next week out of the backfield as a receiver. It's just not going to happen. But yet, I got a question on the live stream this morning that guys were all kind of in the same tier. I mean, we had Alvin Kamara. I think both of us had Alvin Kamara ranked as low-end running back 1s this week. And I said, you can't sit Kamara. You just can't. You can't do it based on these other options. So I'm glad that I gave that advice because it paid off, right? Like Alvin Kamara, you continue to start your studs. And so I think no matter what, you're going to deal with you're not going to have the upside if his involvement in the receiving game isn't there, but yet you still start Alvin Kamara because he can deliver you a performance like this.
Yeah, that's the thing. This is great to see, but again, he's got to get the targets if he's going to really be that truly, truly elite upper echelon back. With that said, you start him. I had so many questions, Yates, on my Instagram Live this morning. Latavius Murray or Alvin Kamara, and I was like, where are we right now? Right? No, that's not where we are. He's an RB1. He remains the RB1. This is why. But again, his upside is a little bit capped if he's not going to get involved in the passing game. Michael Thomas, 11 targets, 9 catches, 105 yards. Just a guaranteed top 12 starter every week, regardless of who's at quarterback, right?
I don't know if I want to say regardless of who's at quarterback. I mean, he's still a top 20 option regardless of who's at quarterback. I think he does get a boost with Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill looked great. Looked good in this matchup. So, and especially too, throwing the ball 37 times. He looked pretty good. So I think, we can continue to rely on Michael Thomas as a top 12 option. If Taysom Hill is at quarterback, if Drew Brees, I mean, I want to see it happen right before before I say, okay, he's a top tier option.
Yeah, I think I'd feel comfortable at this point with Brees. I mean, I think I think Thomas was more about Thomas than it was about Brees. I think as he gets the targets, and I think Brees will give him. But regardless, you're almost always starting Michael Thomas.
Yeah,
it's very rare that you have three options better. Anyway, for the Falcons, Julio guts through his injury, 11 targets, 6 catches, 94 yards. Calvin Ridley, 10 targets, 5 catches, 108 yards. Matt Ryan's lone touchdown goes to Russell Gage. I'm not sure there's much to say in the passing game. Maybe Hayden Hurst, just 1 for 9. I mean, can you start him whenever Julio Jones is healthy?
I mean, you asked us on, forget what podcast, but you asked, Hayden Hurst in the circle. I'll say this like 10 times in this
podcast. It's fine. Just say a previous podcast.
A previous podcast. Perfect. Hayden Hurst, you asked, like, is he in the circle of trust? And I was like, I think so. Like, I want to say so, but I think that he's just one of these guys that low-end tight end 1, high-end tight end 2. It's going to depend on who your other options are, but we've talked about the tight end position. That's pretty nasty as a whole. So, I think you just continue to roll out Hayden Hurst.
Meanwhile, Todd Gurley does return here, but it is a split. 9 touches for 20 yards for Gurley. Ito Smith, 9 touches for 34 yards. Brian Hill, 5 touches for 18 yards. Is there any way you are going to start any of these backs next week against the Chargers?
Absolutely not.
You just can't. You have to stay away from him completely. I don't know where I had Gurley in this one, in the 30s, because I just was not ready to trust him. Obviously, it wasn't a good matchup, but just avoid the entire situation. You'll feel better. Lions 34, Bears 30. Again, no DeAndre Swift here. Adrian Peterson, though, 16 carries, 57 yards. He scores the 2 touchdowns. Can you start him, Nick? I mean, I assume Swift is going to be back because it's apparently an illness and non-COVID, I guess.
Right.
Can you start him next week? Peterson against Green Bay if Swift is out.
Yeah, against Green Bay, you absolutely plug him in. I said on the live stream earlier today, I said, like, Adrian Peterson and Kerryon Johnson, they're going to factor in here. Up against the Bears defense, though, I wasn't super keen on plugging them into my lineup. That didn't turn out. I mean, Adrian Peterson, 2 touchdowns here, like, just absolutely performed. And so I think, up against Green Bay, if Swift is out, then you plug in Peterson because of the matchup.
Yeah, you can't avoid him. I mean, when you're thinking about the Atlanta running backs or starting Adrian Peterson, if he's the guy, it's not even it's not a contest. Meanwhile, Matthew Stafford, 402 yards, 3 touchdowns. By the way, bear in mind, I'm aware that we're talking about the Bears game, and I'm just flying through it without.
Was that an intended pun?
No,
you said bear in mind. That was good, Dan.
Oh, thanks. Yes, intentional entirely. Matthew Stafford throws 3 touchdown passes, 1 to Jesse James, 1 a beautiful catch by Quintez Cephas, 1 to Marvin Jones, 12 targets, 8 catches, 116 yards, and the score. TJ Hawkinson, very involved again, 9 targets, 7 catches, 84 yards. So you start Hawkinson no matter what, and you start Marvin Jones so long as Kenny Golladay is out. Does that basically sum it up?
I think so. At this point.
Yeah, I mean, Hawkinson, for me, I'm ranking him as a top 4 option every week.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Okay, very good. For the Bears, I mean, a bad, we thought you were optimistic. It looked good for a while.
Oh, it looked so good.
It looked so good. I'm sorry. Bad fumble by Trubisky late. He does look decent otherwise, 267 yards, and the touchdown, which goes to Cole Kmet. Allen Robinson, 7 targets, 6 catches, 75 yards. We knew this was going to be a good game for David Montgomery. 17 rush attempts, 72 yards, and 2 scores. Plus, again, he's got that, receiving upside here with 4 catches for 39 yards. Cordarrelle Patterson also sees 10 rush attempts for 59 yards. They've got Houston next week. That's a great matchup. I don't know, Yates. I don't know what to say necessarily. What's any fantasy takeaway about your Bears?
Fantasy takeaways. I mean, Anthony Miller, 5 for 56 on 5 targets. Like, he's getting more involved. It's intriguing to keep an eye on. But at this point of the season, you're not going to be looking to plug him into your lineup unless he goes absolutely, bonkers crazy in week 14. For week 15 or anything like that. Darnell Mooney, talented player, but he's just not seeing enough volume there. Allen Robinson, 6 for 75, should have been 6 for 77. He needs to extend to find that first down to, it's bad. But anyway, we're looking at a top 10 pick for the Chicago Bears, and we might get Trey Lance, and so I'm sitting pretty, whatever it takes.
Way to look on the bright side of life,
Thanks,
my friend. Browns 41, Titans 35. Start with the running game here. Nick Chubb, of course, 18 for 80, plus a 26-yard catch. Kareem Hunt, 14 for 33. plus 3 catches for 24 yards. Baltimore next. Are we starting Kareem Hunt at this point in our fantasy playoffs?
It all depends on your other options. I mean, we all faded Kareem Hunt, and throughout this week, we, ECR had him up at 14, I think. I ended up with him at 20. I'm not sure where you ended up. I know Tags was pretty low on him too. So Kareem Hunt, I mean, at this point, I don't know what the heck's going on. I mean, he's not efficient, not seeing a ton of work, and even in the, it's just he's not seeing a ton of work in the receiving game either, which is what we were saying. Like, this is what provides him the upside, the floor even, and it's just not there. So Kareem Hunt moving forward, I don't think we can trust him. I will probably end up against Baltimore. Geez, I might end up ranking him at like 26. So probably outside my top 24 running backs next week.
I think it depends on who's healthy on that defense, because the run defense for Baltimore looks very different when certain, Williams is healthy and Calais Campbell, all that stuff. So I guess it will depend. But yeah, I think this is a guy who's now outside the RB2 range, which is crazy because I feel like he's just been living on this reputation forever since the very early part of the season, but he's actually been pretty disappointing. Baker Mayfield, though, 25 of 33 for 334 yards and 4 touchdowns. Every receiver gets involved. Rashard Higgins, 9 targets, 6 catches, 95 yards. Peoples-Jones, 2 for 92. It could have been much more with another touchdown. And Jarvis Landry, 10 targets, 8 catches, 62 yards. Landry's the only one who really matters, I think, for fantasy, unless you disagree. And is he somebody who you are now willing to trust week in and week out, since basically every non-crazy wind game, he seems to get the targets and produce enough?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the weather, because that's the issue here, is that all these games that we looked at Jarvis Landry saying that, oh, my word, he crushed my fantasy lineup if I took the shot on him. Those were crazy weather games. So looking at Landry, he's super involved in this offense, and this was a great matchup. So I think that's part of it. We have to acknowledge that. Up against Baltimore, he's not going to end up as a top 24 wide receiver in my rankings like he did this week. He'll end up at like 31, 32, 33, somewhere in that range. Gut reaction here. But I think that's where he's going to end up. And so you can still rely on him because he's going to get the targets and he's going to get the workload. He'll get a boost in full PPR leagues. But yeah, in plus matchups, you can absolutely roll him out there as a top 24 wide receiver.
Yeah, I agree. I really have very little hesitation at this point putting him out there each and every week. For the Titans, weird game, just kind of got away from them early on. Derrick Henry just 15 carries, 60 yards, and a catch for 9. He did lose a fumble. I'm going to just conclude that you have no worries about Derrick Henry, and we're going to move on to the passing game, where Ryan Tannehill winds up with 389 yards and 3 touchdowns and a completely blameless interception. Corey Davis, 12 targets, 11 catches, 182 yards. And A.J. Brown, 7 targets, 4 catches, 87 yards. Could have had that touchdown, fumbled at the 1, so it could have been a much, much bigger game for him. But thankfully, again, he left. You freaked out, as we all did, kind of, because we saw him leave, look like a non-contact injury. But apparently he just slipped, and he was back, and he was okay. So Corey Davis now fully in the circle of trust, right?
Completely. I mean, we've been talking about this the last couple of weeks, that Corey Davis, outside of that Bears game, where he put up a 0, and that was kind of the game that everyone zeroed in and said, like, okay, if he can perform in this matchup, we can now finally trust him. And so now it's taken a few weeks for us to get that trust back up with Corey Davis. At this point, you start him every single week.
Absolutely. And as long as Jonnu Smith is out, do you want to start Firkser? 7 targets, 5 catches, 51 yards, or was this just a product of them being behind and Tannehill needing to throw a ton?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's hard to analyze that and completely say, but Firkser has been he's been the guy on third down this entire season, and we can analyze that and say, like, okay, what the hell are you guys doing as the Titans offense, because Jonnu Smith is immensely more talented than Anthony Firkser. But yet, that's been the case. He's been out there on third down, and Jonnu Smith comes off the field, and he's running routes. And so, I think as long as Jonnu's out, you can look at Anthony Firkser as a streaming option. That's where I had him this week, and it paid off.
Yep, me too. Dolphins 19, Bengals 7. Tua starts here as we expected leading into the week here. At the last couple of days, sounded like that was how it was going to be. And the offense just isn't that good. It's not as good with Tua in. That's all there is to it. He does throw for 296 yards and the touchdown to Mike Gesicki. But what are you going to do with DeVante Parker here with Tua? I mean, he's much better with Ryan Fitzpatrick in. 8 targets is good with Tua. 4 catches for 35 yards is not. So is Parker somebody who you're going to throw out there each and every week without thinking about it, or is he more of a matchup play at this point?
So it's interesting here because you can look at the box score and you can see 8 targets and only 4 catches, and you can be super disappointed in that. But then if you watch that game, you knew that there were 3 targets to DeVante Parker in the end zone. that were broken up by William Jackson. William Jackson's one of the most underrated corners in the NFL right now. He's playing on a bad team, so he's not getting the attention. But DeVante Parker, I mean, he could have ended up with a monstrous game in this one if he had been able to connect on those catches, which he normally comes down with. Contested catches, that's kind of his specialty. So they're looking his way in the end zone. So I think that you can continue to plug in DeVante Parker. Now, he doesn't have as high of a ceiling with Ryan Fitzpatrick out of the lineup and Tua Tagovailoa in, but yet you can still look his way, as I'll probably end up like 27, 28, 29 in my wide receiver rankings, probably where he's going to end up.
The end zone targets were what kept me from dropping him crazy, because I initially ranked him with Fitz in as a starter, and I think I wound up having him like 18th or something like that. And then when Tua came in and I kind of reran the projections, he still came out to like a low end wide receiver 2, basically, right in that range. Because he gets the end zone targets, that's been consistent, actually, with Tua. And it's just more about the yardage and everything like that. So, yeah, if he gets the touchdown, and he will get targeted in the end zone because they like to have Tua make those throws as they get close to the end zone, then, yeah, he might be. It's just something where I'm not going to feel that's what he needs. I feel like now he's becoming sort of a touchdown-dependent wide receiver, which, given how often he's targeted near the end zone, that's still somebody worth starting. But it does make me a little nervous, and his floor is certainly lower. Myles Gaskin, 141 total yards on 23 touches. He is right back in your lineup as a no-question every week starter, correct?
100%. Now, it's going to depend a little bit on if Salvon Ahmed's back and healthy. Okay, what does it actually look like if Salvon Ahmed is back in the lineup and healthy, and did he carve out a role for himself in this offense? He obviously was out this game. He had DeAndre Washington out this game, Matt Breida. So it was essentially Myles Gaskin, Lynn Bowden, and Patrick Laird as the main guys. Yeah, you're giving the ball to Myles Gaskin the majority of the time, right? So I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do when Salvon Ahmed is back and healthy. But yeah, at this point, you continue to plug in Myles Gaskin as a high-end running back too every single week.
All right, for the Bengals, Brandon Allen leaves very late with a chest injury. I'm not sure of the severity as we record this. He does throw one touchdown, which goes to Tyler Boyd, the long 72-yard catch and run before Boyd is ejected for fighting, I guess. T. Higgins, a respectable 7 targets, 5 catches, and 56 yards. And Gio Bernard is, as usual, unfortunately, irrelevant. Joe Mixon is eligible to come off the IR next week, but we have to see about that. Usual question, what Bengals, if any, are we starting? Generally speaking, they've got Dallas next.
Yeah, so it depends on the severity of Brandon Allen's injury. If it's Ryan Finley, then that's concerning, right? But I think at this point, can we just trademark the 5 for 56 line as T. Higgins? Like, can we just call it pulling the T. Higgins, right? Like, I feel like this is what he does every single week. So, and you have the chance for him to find the end zone, right? So, T. Higgins is probably the one that I still want to rely on. It was so frustrating this week. I faded Tyler Boyd based on last week's performance with Brandon Allen, and then he comes out and gets that 72-yard touchdown. I was like, crap. I was like, all right, here we go. And then he does nothing else because he gets ejected. So, yeah, I think Boyd's someone that you can look at as a low-end wide receiver 3, but T. Higgins is probably the one that I still want to rely on. Otherwise, I mean, Drew Sample, can we talk about Drew Sample for a second? Like,
sure, yeah.
I mean, he's been 7 targets, 7 catches, 49 yards. Like, at the tight end position, that's enough to put you in the streaming conversation at least. So I think he's someone that fantasy managers, depending on who you have at tight end that you may be disappointed with or you may be looking to replace, like Drew Sample might be a decent pivot option.
Yeah, I mean, Sample does have 12 targets now in the last 2 games. So that is, as a tight end, that's kind of gold, basically, of what we're looking at. And if Mixon comes back and he's a full go, are you willing, despite how kind of putrid the offense looks, do you think you're going to be willing to throw him back out there? Again, Dallas next.
Oh, man. So it depends on, one, who else I have on my team, right? Mm-hmm. That's going to depend. But then, 2, it depends on his practice reports this week. If he comes out and Wednesday, he's activated from off of IR or whatever, and he practices in full. Yep. And he practices in full the entire week. Yep, for sure. I'm plugging him into my lineup, no questions asked. If he gets in like a limited practice on Friday and didn't practice on Wednesday and Thursday, that's a situation where I'm like, I really don't want to play Joe Mixon because I just have no idea what his workload's going to be like.
Yeah, Vikings 27, Jaguars 24 in overtime. This was a fun game to watch if you weren't rooting for either team. Kirk Cousins throws for 305 yards and 3 touchdowns. He is charged with 2 turnovers, though. Both receivers get it done here. Jefferson, 12 targets, 9 catches, 121 yards, and the score. Adam Thielen, 11 targets, 8 catches, 75 yards, and a score. Specifically tags, especially, I've always been a little higher on the Minnesota wide receivers than he has, and he's always been concerned about the volume. They've got the Bucs and the Bears next. What's your level of confidence, let's say 1 to 10, on both of these wide receivers going forward? 10 being I'm just starting them almost without question every time out.
8. I mean, they get a boost in plus matchups like this one. I had both of these guys as top 10 receivers this week. And I got a question on the live stream this morning that said, like, do I really don't feel confident plugging in both Thielen and Jefferson? Do I sit one of them and do I play DeVante Parker? And I was like, I mean, it's up to you, but I feel like you can confidently plug in both Thielen and Jefferson, and that obviously paid off. So, I mean, these guys at this point, the confidence level in them for sure is sky high. They get a boost in the plus matchups, like I said, and they'll come down just a little bit when they face the Bucs and the Bears. But, I mean, yeah, you still start them.
Yeah, I kind of think they're 10 because I think I'm just starting them, and I'm going to stop worrying. I mean, they're going to be, at least against the Bucs, the Vikings will probably be chasing points.
Right.
But, I mean, Kirk Cousins throws 3 touchdown passes every game at this point. So, yeah, I'm just kind of going with them. Dalvin Cook was reportedly beat up a little bit coming in, so, of course, he gets 38 touches for 179 yards. Tough matchups are upcoming. Nobody cares. Start him for the Jaguars. I'm not sure what Gardner Minshew has done to Doug Marrone, but doesn't start here. He is not starting next week. Marrone has already come out and said that. It's going to be Glennon again. Mike Glennon does throw for 280 yards and the ridiculous nonsense score to Laviska Shenault, but he does turn the ball over. That was so dumb. We project. We can't look at things like that. I mean, that's not supposed to happen. Come on. If you didn't see it, just Google Laviska Shenault touchdown. You'll understand what we're talking about. But he does turn the ball over, 3 times. Collin Johnson is your leading receiver with 66 yards. DJ Chark does have 7 targets, but just 2 catches for 41 yards. The Titans are next. Are you starting any Jaguars wide receiver? Again, Mike Glennon will be the quarterback next week.
Against the Titans, yeah. I think that you can continue to look at these guys. I mean, Collin Johnson, his workload is... it's interesting because Chris Conley was active for this game, but he had a bad fumble. And I don't know if, was Collin Johnson's involvement. I need to see the routes run and the snap count numbers from this after those become available so to fully analyze this. But Collin Johnson was a talented wide receiver coming out of Texas. He dealt with some injuries and was pushed down draft boards. And so, I mean, he can succeed in the NFL with his size, and we're seeing that. He's put up some solid numbers here the past couple of games, and, I mean, Mike Glennon seems to trust him. So, but again, we're in week 14 of your fantasy football season at this point. You can't be confidently rolling out Collin Johnson. You can plug him in as a flex option. DJ Chark, you can plug in as a wide receiver 3. Laviska Shenault, I'm not trusting him because I don't want to bet on a fluke touchdown every single week. So
touchdown.
Yeah. So at this point, I think DJ Chark's still the one that you want to go with. 7 targets. That led the team. It's enough.
I know. I'll probably still rank DJ Chark as like a wide receiver 3, a low-end wide receiver 3, but it's making me mad because I like Chark. I love Chark as a player, and I think I could just watch him being so frustrated out there every game except the first game with Luton where he's just been like, yay, every game. He just is so angry. Raiders 31, Jets 28. The final touchdown to Henry Ruggs, of course, shouldn't have happened, but Derek Carr delivered regardless. Winds up with 381 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also runs for a score. Much of his production goes to Darren Waller, 17 targets, 13 catches, 200 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Insane. So Ruggs does wind up with 84 yards total and a score. Hunter Renfrow, 4 catches for 47 yards. Nelson Aguilar sees 11 targets, but just 4 catches for 38 yards. Devonta Booker does not come through, filling in for Josh Jacobs, just 17 touches for 51 yards. I don't know, Yates. I mean, other than Darren Waller is really good and Derek Carr kind of made up for it for fantasy managers who were willing to trust him again. Any big takeaways here for the Raiders?
Not really. I think that, the Henry Ruggs putting up 84 yards and a score is more so to do with Greg Williams and that play call at the end of the game. I don't know what the hell you're doing. You don't
often have players come out and just be like,
Marcus May after the game put him on blast. 100% was
which is true.
What are we doing here?
Even if you didn't see it, by the way, I assume you have, but if you didn't see it, the Jets were ahead. It was the last second. They basically needed a touchdown. It was a 45-yard, 50-yard touchdown or something, and the Jets called, Williams called an all-out blitz.
Yeah.
An all-out blitz, and it was a fairly easy touchdown. That was just a terrible call that everybody's just been like, I don't understand. We don't know what it is. Why don't you just have 10 guys sitting back there on the goal line and just waiting to knock it down? But we digress. I agree. I mean, I don't know. But, yeah, that's the thing. Are you excited about Ruggs? Are you excited about any of these wide receivers? Aguilar was really close to having a nice game. He could have very easily had a much bigger game. But He didn't. So, I mean, are you comfortable starting any of these wide receivers at all going forward?
Again, it comes down to philosophy and what you're willing to chase, right? Are you willing to chase the yardage and the touchdown numbers that came on low target totals? Or are you willing to chase the targets? For me, as a fantasy manager, I'm more so willing to chase the targets. And so Nelson Aguilar with 11, yeah, he only put up 4 for 38, but 11 targets. And again, in the final minutes of that game, Derek Carr barely missed Nelson Aguilar on a big play, right? If that had connected, then we're not talking about Henry Ruggs at all. So, yeah, I think Aguilar is still the one that I want to look at in this backfield. I'm more excited for Henry Ruggs down the road in a dynasty sense. But as of next week, yeah, I think you can look Nelson Aguilar's way. He's probably the only one that I'll be willing to look at, though.
Yeah, now they do play Indianapolis, but yeah, I agree. Aguilar is the guy who I would go. It's funny that Aguilar is follow the targets now, considering his whole year before the last couple of weeks was. I don't know. He's producing, but he's not getting the targets. But he is getting the targets now. And again, like you said, they almost connected on that touchdown towards the end of the game, in which case we would have been looking at this very differently. So I agree with you. Aguilar is the guy I want to the extent I want to roster a Raiders wide receiver, but it's really borderline wide receiver 3 territory. For the Jets, I told you I was ranking the Jets wide receivers all kind of bunched up together in borderline wide receiver 3 territory. And Jamison Crowder came through at least 7 targets, 5 catches. 47 yards and 2 touchdowns. Denzel Mims, only 3 targets, 2 catches, 40 yards. Rashad Perriman, just 1 catch for 22 yards. The Jets get the Seahawks next. Do you want to start Crowder or any Jets wide receiver next week?
This was so frustrating because looking at this entire week, I was like, no, I don't want to start any of the Jets receivers. And then the more that I looked at it, I was like, okay, well, they've actually been kind of producing here recently. Yep. But I knew that as soon as I bought in, this was going to happen. So, I mean, Crowder's the one that you can look at. Darnold seemed to latch back onto him, which wasn't the case here previously. And there's more conversation of okay, is he trying to audition for the next team? Trying to show that he can push the ball deep downfield, whatever. There's more of a narrative behind that. But I think for him, you just lock onto your slot receiver, right? The guy who's continuously open, and that's Jamison Crowder. So 2 touchdowns, we can't expect that every single week, not in this Jets offense. But I think that, against the Seahawks, I think you can absolutely look Jamison Crowder's way as a high-end flex play.
Yeah, I think that's right. High-end flex is what we're talking about, though, at this point, which is basically where I had all of them ranked at this point. And I agree with you. That was kind of why I felt a little more confident, because it did seem like there was buzz around the fact that this is going to be a thing. Darnold is going to push the ball down the field a little bit, but he didn't target either Mims or Perriman as much as I thought he would, as much as he had in previous games. So, yeah, I'm going to be careful with them. But again, Jamison Crowder, at the very least, you've seen a connection between the two of them in the past. So he is somebody who you can roll out there again as basically a borderline wide receiver 3. Meanwhile, the one Jet that everybody seems to be like, we're okay with this week. We will buy in. We will trust this week was Frank Gore. And through no fault of his own, he left almost immediately that game with, evaluated for a concussion. Ty Johnson, who nobody was starting anyway, comes through with 22 carries, 104 yards, and a touchdown, 2 catches for 13 yards. Josh Adams also gets involved, 8 carries for 74 yards. I mean, Gore, no Gore. We are not starting a Jets running back against Seattle next week. We'll talk about it in a bit. Wayne Gallman and Alfred Morris had fine games this week against Seattle, but we're not starting a Jets running back regardless of who it is next week, are we?
Not in the fantasy football playoffs. I'm not going near that.
Yeah, there we go. Now we're back to normal. Okay, let's stay away from the Jets as our lives are on the line here. Colts 26, Texans 20. Yates, I messaged you. I was so mad. Nobody has made me more mad, really, than the Colts and what happened with Jonathan Taylor. And I'm heavily invested in my own personal leagues anyway, but I'm also heavily invested, obviously. When you rank somebody, we all feel this way. We try to analyze, we try to make our projections, and then we rank the guys. We all were pretty high on Taylor this week. We're getting the start-sit questions. I'm saying Taylor. And then he gets the start. He looks fine. Absolutely fine. 2 carries, and then it's Nyheim Hines and the touchdown. And then it's Jordan Wilkinson. I'm like, I don't even know what's going on. But then finally he comes through 13 for 91 on the ground, 3 for 44, plus that touchdown through the air. Now, Hines, again, did get the touchdown, and he and Wilkins combined for 16 touches. But is Taylor now fully in the circle of trust with Las Vegas up next?
No, because you continue to see Frank Reich roll out Nyheim Hines on a 4th and 1 near the goal line.
What is happening? I don't understand.
Does Frank Reich know what number each player is? Like, does he know that Nyheim Hines is 21? Like, does he think that he's 28? You know, like, can we go into the equipment room next week and can we switch the numbers and we might actually start to see Jonathan Taylor utilized as the short yardage back and Nyheim Hines as the pass catcher? Like, what in the world is going on? So I think, I mean, the talented back here, obviously, the more talented back is Jonathan Taylor. We can all sit here and say that. I think that you can continue to roll out Jonathan Taylor, especially against Las Vegas next week. We just saw Ty Johnson, tear them up. So I think, you can look his way. But as far as the circle of trust, man, it's still a complete guessing game because we have no idea what the hell Frank Reich is doing.
This is sort of like, I'll give an answer out of both sides of my mouth. I don't feel comfortable with Jonathan Taylor right now because I have no idea, for the exact reasons that you said, what Frank Reich is going to do. At the same time, I'm guaranteed starting him against Las Vegas, and then I'm going to guaranteed start him the following week against schedule,
Houston, right? Like, it's the schedule.
You just can't get away from it. So to the extent I'm like, am I starting him now without thinking about it? Yeah, I am. So in that sense, he's in the circle of trust. Do I feel in any way comfortable that he's not going to get 3 touches in the game and Nyheim Hines is going to get 20? No. But still, I think you start him, and I think they know. They got to know. You have to know. This is why you win. Although they probably should have lost that game, but we're not going to talk about that.
Right.
We talked about T.Y. Hilton already. How about Michael Pittman Jr. here? Catches all 5 of his targets, which are good, for 46 yards. But again, Hilton is the one who's kind of getting the production here. So how do you feel about Pittman? And, I mean, I've got to ask, would you prefer T.Y. Hilton to Pittman going forward?
I'm still going to prefer Pittman, especially next week against Las Vegas, because LaMarcus Joyner is the slot corner. Now, again, I'll look into this as we move into the week, but LaMarcus Joyner out of the slot should have T.Y. Hilton, should be more of a tougher matchup. You're looking at either Damon Arnett if he's back, Trayvon Mullen. Like, that should be a matchup that Michael Pittman should be able to exploit. And he's still seeing the work. 9 targets the week before, 5 this week, caught all 5 of them for 46 yards. Like, it's not hurting your lineup, and he does present the talent to be able to, win you a week. And part of this too, one of those catches for Michael Pittman was in the red zone. He was able to get near the goal line, right? So he's seeing those opportunities where it could be a much, much bigger game for him. So I think you continue to plug in Michael Pittman Jr. And I think it's going to be dependent on matchups. They'll be closer in my rankings than they were this week, but I'll still go Pittman there.
I agree. I'm still going with Pittman. Oh, man, Pittman is so talented. And Hilton, look, I've always liked, we joke about it a lot. We joke about a lot of silly things, like we make like one-off statements and we're like, that's your statement, like Logan Thomas. But I agree. I've always liked Hilton as a player, but Pittman is so talented, and I'm going to continue to rank him above Hilton as well. It's just the way it's going to come out. But again, both these guys at this point, I think you can kind of roll out in your lineup and see what happens. For the Texans, we talked about Keke Coutee already. We didn't talk about why, I don't know what you're doing with your projections, Yates, but why you didn't rank unstoppable Chad Hansen as just like a top, 25 options. 5 for 101. I'm just joking. Obviously, nobody ranked him. Kidding. Brandon Cooks, 8 targets, 5 catches, 65 yards. Again, you mentioned it. He left briefly with a concussion or a concussion evaluation. Glad he got back into the game. Obviously, could have had a little bit of a bigger game had he not left. On the ground, David Johnson does return, 10 carries, 44 yards, and the score. But Duke Johnson gets all the receiving work, as we talked about, all 6 of his targets for just 24 yards. Is there any confidence for you starting either back going forward?
I had faded David Johnson this week. I was saying, like, up against the Indianapolis Colts defense with DeForest Buckner, I was like, I don't really want to go near him. And then he comes out and scores that touchdown. I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. So I think with David Johnson, I think, it's going to depend on the matchup.
They've got the Bears next. How about that?
Man,
what do you want to do with them?
I really don't want to be looking his way. He'll probably just be a high-end RB3 in my rankings that you're just hoping falls into the end zone.
Yeah, and he probably will. Just so you know, when you rank him as an RB3, that's just what happens.
100%.
Really, this is what I wanted to, it's very funny actually, because I kind of thought like, all right, you know what? They will get David Johnson now involved in the passing game, right? This is what it's got to happen right now because they have nobody else. And they did get a running back involved, but it was just like...
with the initials D. Johnson.
Right. Maybe they were confused. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they were like, whatever. Yeah, I don't know, man. Whatever. And Deshaun Watson, he runs for a touchdown. He throws for 341 yards. You're starting him every week. Rams, 38.
Really quick. Yeah. With the, I wanted to go back to the Colts. I'm sure that we'll talk about it at some point, but the tight end position here with the Colts, so frustrating. I mean, Trey Burton comes out last week, gets the 6 targets, and the touchdown, and then 3 targets, 1 catch for 11 yards. And Alie-Cox, 5 targets, 3 for 23. At this point, I'm staying far away.
I'm sorry. We can talk about that because every week I feel like we talk about it, whether it's on our Start Sit Show or even on Friday, and we talk about Trey Burton, and we're like, yeah, sure. Streaming conversation, maybe. I don't want it. I mean, addition by subtraction, basically addition to my, mental well-being and thinking about fantasy football by subtracting the Colts tight ends out of consideration. That's really where I am because, I don't think you can have any faith whatsoever. And Phillip Rivers, I don't know, he's able to go to his wide receivers, again, with these matchups that they have right now where you can go to the wide receivers and not worry about it too much. So that's a good point, but I agree with you, completely stay away. Rams 38, Cardinals 28. Let's talk about the running game here. I mean, Darrell Henderson starts, he leaves for a while, but he comes back and he does eventually have a gorgeous 38-yard touchdown run. But Cam Akers, 21 carries, 72 yards. He does score the touchdown. What do you think about this running back? I mean, look, this is 3 straight games here with a touchdown for Cam Akers. I mean, are you willing to roll him out there right now? Like, where do you expect that he's going to be ranked for you next week against the Patriots?
He'll still probably be a high-end running back 3. I mean, we've seen this with Darrell Henderson. Henderson has come out earlier this season. He's put together a dominant performance, and then now we're sitting here a few weeks later, and we're saying, well, Darrell Henderson only got 3 carries. Yeah, we can talk about the injury and everything like that, but, I mean, at the trust level here for this running back room, I've been burned by it this season already. So especially going into such a crucial week next week, week 14, this is the playoffs. Like you have to win. Newsflash, you have to win in order to move forward. So it's like, are you really going to put your fantasy football championship hopes in the palm of Cam Akers? Yeah, he can get 21 carries. Still only averaged 3.4 yards per carry. Yeah, he found the end zone. He's an electric player out in space, like phenomenal racket ability, right? You saw it with that reception, one reception for 22 yards. That's where he needs to be utilized more. And I've said this the entire offseason. I'll continue to say it. That's where he needs to be utilized more rather than this between the tackles runner. That's where Darrell Henderson thrives. So I just don't want to trust it. I really don't. He'll be a high-end running back 3 because he can absolutely go off for the score and see the majority of the work, but there's no trust level for me yet.
That's the same way I am, man. I so desperately want to. I so desperately want to be like, yeah, this is it. But I still can't. Meanwhile, look, if you started pretty much anybody on the Rams, you're pretty happy here. I mean, Goff throws for 351 yards. He does throw only the 1 touchdown, which goes to Tyler Higbee. Robert Woods, 11 targets, 10 catches, 85 yards. Cooper Kupp, 9 targets, 8 catches, 73 yards. I don't know, man. Anything you want to say about the Rams? This is just, I feel like there are going to be the occasional sort of bad game. Woods has seen his targets kind of spike lately, but anything you really want to say about these guys? Because this is just kind of what I almost expected coming into this game. Yeah,
I mean, Robert Woods, 38 targets over his last 3 games. You can continue to plug him in as a low-end wide receiver 1 moving forward. Cooper Kupp had a nice bounce-back game here. Gerald Everett with 7 targets, 6 receptions, 44 yards is kind of interesting, especially when you factor in that Tyler Higbee was able to get that touchdown and saw 6 targets himself. Whereas previously I've said if these 2 guys are healthy, I really don't want to look at either one of them. But I mean, given the choice between Gerald Everett and Trey Burton at this point, I'm taking Gerald Everett. And then Jared Goff, I mean, he 350 yards, the passing touchdown, but he also did have that QB sneak and was able to find the end zone there too. So a nice fantasy day here for Jared Goff, which I did not expect. So it's I think they're still kind of matchup dependent as far as Jared Goff looking his way, Gerald Everett, Tyler Higbee, but Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, man, they're in the circle of trust.
Yeah, I feel like Goff is never going to be ranked in my top 12 regardless of the matchup. I'm always just going to kind of be like, if you're in a deep league and everybody's kind of rostered, you can get away with them, but I'm never going to feel that comfortable. Meanwhile, if you had told me that Kyler Murray was going to throw for 173 yards and rush for 15 yards and without a rushing score, I would have been like, this is probably the worst game of his entire career. But he throws 3 touchdown passes. He does have the pick. He does lose a fumble. The 3 touchdown passes, 2 of them, one came right off the bat, but 2 of them go to Dan Arnold. One of them goes to DeAndre Hopkins, who was, I think, shut out in the first half, winds up seeing 13 targets, 8 catches, 52 yards in the score. So, look, I wasn't able to watch this game that closely. I was kind of in and out a little bit on it. I don't know. Did Murray look fine passing the ball? Did his shoulder look better than it had looked in the previous 2 games?
So I was kind of in and out too. I was watching it in different instances. So I wasn't able to analyze Murray's shoulder specifically. He looked out of rhythm. this entire one. I think the pass rush was getting to him. He just looked out of sync. And so that's reflected in his 173 passing yards and only 21 for 39 as far as his completion and attempts. So I think, I mean, Hopkins, it's interesting too. You brought that up. Like, I think he caught one at the end of the half. It was reviewed.
But I think they overturned it, I think.
But,
right?
I mean, Hopkins was pissed. He was ticked. So you saw him start, 13 targets. That pretty much all came in the second half. And after he went into that locker room, it was like, get me the ball. So, I think Hopkins at this point, you continue to plug him in. Christian Kirk is the interesting one here. 3 targets, 1 reception, 2 yards. I was saying, like, it all depends on Kyler Murray's shoulder. And if he's able to push the ball deep downfield at this point, it was a tough matchup against the Rams passing attack. I don't think you can trust Kirk.
Yeah, I haven't been trusting Kirk for a while. There was like one game where I was like, ooh, you know what? My projections bring him up to like 29th, but I just can't at this point. It is encouraging for Hopkins, especially given how inconsistent the yardage, again, wasn't really there with 52, but it was nice to see basically, whatever happened in that halftime where basically they came out and he was like, I don't care that Jalen Ramsey is shadowing me. Throw me the ball. And, it did work out. Kenyan Drake, only 10 carries, but 49 yards and the score. I think the big thing here is that it does, whether it's the shoulder or not, Murray is no longer kind of saying, we're going to design these plays at the goal line where I'm going to score. He's willing to hand it off to the back. So as much as Drake may be touchdown dependent, I feel like he's pretty much in the circle of trust because he is getting all those carries. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. I mean, I was sweating it out because I had Kenyan Drake as my start of the week, and through the first 3 quarters of that game, it did not look good. But 4.9 yards per carry, found the end zone, and 3 targets. It's enough to put him into that. I had him at 17 on the week, so it's enough to put him in that conversation. And at this point, he's starting to see the work around the goal line. And if that's the case, then in this offense, you got to continue to roll that guy into your starting lineup.
Yeah, they've got the Giants next, who beat the Seahawks 17-12. A lot of that based on their defense. But I will say, look, I mean, Wayne Gallman, we talk about it every week where we're just like, I don't know, I guess. He beats the tough matchups. I guess we'll roll him out there. 16 for 135. He doesn't get the score. Alfred Morris winds up getting both of the touchdowns. But, I mean, Wayne Gallman, like, you want to talk circle of trust. This is circle of trust. Right? And Devonta Freeman, by the way, as much as he was on IR, I believe he was placed on the COVID reserve list. He was, right? So Wayne Gallman, just like, I mean, if you're in your fantasy playoffs right now, you are putting Wayne Gallman in your lineup next week against Arizona, no questions asked, right?
Yeah, at this point. I mean, he'll probably be a mid-range RB2, so I'm still not, completely.
That's what I mean, by the way, to be clear. That's what I mean, to be clear. I'm not saying like this is like your 6th-ranked running back, right? If you're like an RB2 every week, RB2, that's the guy who you're just set it and forget it, right?
Yeah, I think it depends on if Devonta Freeman comes off the COVID list as far as like where exactly he's going to end up in my rankings. But
why
I'm telling you, like, let me say, like his floor is going to be 24. For me, like he's still going to be an RB2, but it's going to be dependent upon Devonta Freeman being active as to where exactly he's going to land in that. But his floor is going to be 24. You're still rolling him into your lineup.
Given what they're giving to Alfred Morris at this point, I can't imagine that Freeman comes in and takes a bigger piece of the pie. Like, why would he? At this point, given what Gallman is doing.
Well, why would a head coach give Nyheim Hines a 4th and 1 carry when they have Jonathan Taylor? I mean, we can sit here and analyze rational coaching and talk about what it could be.
Frank Reich is not the coach of but no, that's fair. And again, I think we throw out the entire passing game here since it was with Colt McCoy through only 105 yards. I mean, Evan Ingram was your leading receiver with 32 yards, but we just throw it out, right? I mean, they played a conservative game. They relied on their defense, and hopefully Daniel Jones is able to return next, and we can think about it then. Yeah,
I think it's interesting. What would this game have been if they were playing with from behind, like most rational people would have expected?
Right.
And I mean, Sterling Shepard disappointed, 6 targets, 1 catch for 22 yards. I wasn't super high on Sterling Shepard this week, but I did not see New York leading this game the majority of the time.
I hope I don't, we get so many questions, Yates, on our start-sit shows, but so many people asked about Sterling Shepard. I remember I actually uttered the words. I was like, oh, Shepard's the guy this week, right? Like, that's the line of, like, who do I start? And I almost always had somebody, whoever they were asking against, higher than Shepard, just because I realized that the matchup was supposed to be good, but I wasn't willing to trust a pass catcher with Colt McCoy back there. So, I mean, I just don't think that you can start any of these guys so long as Colt McCoy is the starter. And again, it was positive news this week on Daniel Jones. So hopefully that means that he's going to be back next week. For Seattle, I mean, we talked about why is Russell Wilson ranked as the second ranked quarterback, and forget about you, Yates, whatever. You don't know everything. So 263 yards, just the one score. He does throw the pick. He was just harassed all day. I mean, he was sacked 5 times. He also loses a fumble, but he does rush for 45 yards. Really, it's about Chris Carson, 13 carries for 65 yards. He also catches 3 for 45 and the touchdown. I mean, there's nothing really to talk about. I think with Carson, like he's just, you feel fine with Carson as an RB1 going forward, right?
Yep. Yeah. The Carlos Hyde, super great. Like Carlos Hyde being questionable coming into this game and like being listed as he's expected to play, right? Like dealing with that injury, that was enough for me to rank Chris Carson in my top 10. If we saw that Carlos Hyde was, had practiced fully, that would have been enough to bump him down, a couple of spots. But yeah, at this point, Chris Carson's, no matter what the state of the offense is, which that's a dumpster fire right now, no matter what the state of the offense is, Chris Carson's seen enough work to be a top 12 back every single week.
And DK Metcalf 5 for 80, Tyler Lockett 6 for 63. And again, Wilson just didn't have a good game. I don't know, man. Like, you're starting DK Metcalf. I think you're still starting Tyler Lockett. Like we basically just say, you just start him as a wide receiver 2 every week. And I mean, I'm still starting Russell Wilson each and every week. Maybe not as the number 2 quarterback on the week, but I'm still probably starting him. And they get the Jets next week. But I don't know, man. Any commentary here on this? Like, what is a really, really bad loss?
Oh, it's terrible. I mean, DK Metcalf could have ended up with a bigger performance here too. That's the one thing. The one thing that we can say about DK Metcalf, for him to be pushed already in year 2, to be pushed into the elite category of these wide receivers in the NFL, is he struggles with these drops occasionally, and he had a pretty bad one that would have been a big gain. So that's the one thing you got to kind of live with. But yeah, at this point, you're continuously plugging in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett into your starting lineups. Russell Wilson, I mean, at this point, I had him significantly lower than ECR this week. I'll have him as a low-end QB1 next week. But again, I mean, it's the Jets. So, yeah, I think you gotta still start him.
Yates, you were right. I was wrong. I want you to know that, and I want that on the public record. You were right about Russell Wilson this week. I was wrong. Congratulations. With that, we're going to move on to the Packers 30 and the Eagles 16. Aaron Rodgers throws for 295 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's just fun to watch. I really enjoy watching him.
He's one of the best quarterbacks in the game of all time.
It's amazing, and I really hope that I hit on my Aaron Rodgers MVP bet. Davante Adams, 12 targets, 10 catches, 121 yards, and 2 touchdowns. It seems like if they want, they could throw 4 touchdowns to Davante Adams every game. 100%. It's like they just like, yeah, this is what we want to do. And thanks to a very late, lengthy 77-yard run, Aaron Jones winds up with 15 for 130 and a touchdown. I mean, Robert Tonyan does 4 for 39 and the score, and Allen Lazard gets involved, 3 catches for 50 yards. I mean, you're starting Aaron Jones, you're starting Aaron Rodgers, you're starting Davante Adams. I guess, is Tonyan in the tight end circle of trust at this point?
Yeah, I think so. Yep. What is this, 3 straight games of scores for him?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, at this point, you plug in Robert Tonyan as a mid-range tight end 1 every single week now moving forward.
And how about Lazard here? I mean, there are a lot of fantasy managers. Lazard came on early, and, fantasy managers held on to him while he was out. Now he's back, and he's not, like, dominating any week, but I feel like we're in this range right here where you get these flex plays, and you're, like, not all that comfortable with them. I mean, is Lazard a guy who you think you can start most weeks going forward at this point?
Yeah, starting with, tempering your expectations that he is a flex play. Like he brings the upside of absolutely being able to connect on a pass in the end zone. Like he can absolutely find the end zone like he did 2 weeks ago. And yeah, he might not present the biggest yardage upside, but it's his involvement in, the as far as a receiver for the touchdown category. There was a weird way of phrasing that, but I couldn't figure out how to land the plane. With Allen Lazard, I think at this point, you just continue to plug him in as a flex play because he brings that upside.
Okay, Yates, who's starting at quarterback for the Eagles next week?
Jalen Hurts.
Is it? Do you think this is the official benching and it's Jalen Hurts time?
I think so. I mean,
okay.
You can look at the stats: 5 for 12, 109 yards, but he does find the end zone, and it was a nice pass to Greg Ward in the back of the end zone. Like,
and he created it. Like he created what I mean?
it.
He got
Carson
out of the pocket.
Wentz. Carson Wentz does not make that.
No. That's the thing. I mean, and it's in their best interest to do it, which is crazy to me. Maybe I have, and I just can't think of it. I just can't remember seeing a quarterback regress like this. And you see it with Hurts, and I get that like he brings, because he has such an ability to run, that the defense doesn't play the same, and it's kind of new and exciting. So maybe if they have a week to prepare for him, maybe they'd be better. But you just see how much better the offense looks when he's out there. But I mean, I guess bottom line is, what Eagle are you willing to start on a regular basis going forward? They have the Saints next week.
Oh, man.
I mean, are you starting Miles Sanders 10 for 31 here?
So, okay, so let's talk about Miles Sanders. So I faded Sanders this week because I was like, again, all logic points to that this should be a fantastic matchup for Miles Sanders against Green Bay. The run defense is just terrible. They're allowing the third most fantasy points to opposing running backs. And so you could sit here and say, yeah, Miles Sanders should have a great game. At one point, Jordan Howard was the main rushing yardage leader in this game. Yeah. And Boston Scott had a big run that was called back on an offensive holding. Like this, they're starting to see Miles Sanders is not receiving the majority of the workload here in this backfield, which is so frustrating because he's clearly the most talented back. It's just not happening. So I think Miles Sanders, I don't know if he's in the must-start category anymore. Like, this was the matchup that you needed for him to go off to be able to say, okay, yes, he's in the must-start category. Even to get in a tough matchup next week against the Saints, like, yeah, that's a matchup where you still plug him in. I don't think he's in that conversation anymore.
My guess is I will still rank him as an RB2. I think next week. It's hard to say. We've got so much data to dig through, but yeah, this is really concerning. This is the first time I'm really, especially this matchup. I mean, this was the one that he had to smash, and he didn't come close, and there were a lot of warning signs. So yeah, this whole Eagles team, man. I mean, Dallas Goedert, fine. I think he had 66 yards receiving. You could probably start him each and every week, even with Ertz back. But yeah, it might just be time to avoid this entire team.
Yep.
And just feel better about it. Last game, let's go to the Patriots 45.
The curb stomping?
I don't even know what we're supposed to do about this game. I mean, Cam Newton, he throws for a touchdown and he runs for 2 touchdowns. Are you willing to start Cam Newton every week at this point without really thinking about it going forward?
No, because he got 69 passing yards. Like, what is going on here? He only threw the ball 19 times. Yeah, I know they were up 45-0. Dear goodness. Yeah. Okay. So with Cam Newton, I think that it's so frustrating because I had been ranking Cam Newton as a starter for the last 2 weeks. He had fallen short. And then so I was like, okay, I'm done. Rank him at 18 this week. Oh, this is the week that he decides to run for 2 touchdowns. Yep. Sounds about right. So Cam Newton, I think he's a streaming quarterback. You're hoping that he finds the end zone as a runner. Now he's doing it. 11 rushing touchdowns on the season. The record is 14, which was set by Cam Newton back in his rookie year. So like he's finding the end zone with regularity as a runner, but I don't want to rely on that. I don't think that you can. Yeah. So especially when he has no upside whatsoever in the passing game. So I think at this point you can look at Cam Newton as a high-end QB2, but I don't want to rank him any higher than that.
Yeah, and they're going up against the Rams next week, so it's not exactly something where you want to go crazy. And look, Harris, 16 for 80 on the ground. Is there anyone, would you start him or really anyone at this point on the Patriots regularly? Or is Newton the closest who's like a borderline QB1 maybe in the right matchup?
I mean, Harris looks great. And as for everything that we talk about this offense, like he looks great as an NFL running back. He's going to be in the NFL for a long time. Like he's just succeeding with this opportunity. For fantasy football, he's bringing no upside because it's Cam Newton at the goal line. Correct. So with Damien Harris, I think that you can look at him as a like kind of in this is going to sound gross, but like kind of in the same territory of like a Frank Gore right now, right?
Yes,
like,
that's the name that came to mind. Yes, absolutely. Like a very low upside guy who you can be like, all right, this guy's going to get me, I don't know, like he'll come close to double digits and half PPR points, probably without a touchdown. But yeah, I can roll him out there with 0 upside and just feel like, okay, at least I know I'm going to get some points, right?
Right.
That's basically what it is. Yeah. How do you explain what happened to the Chargers today? I mean, Herbert was one of the most reliable quarterbacks in the game in fantasy, and 209 yards and 2 interceptions. Austin Eckler, 8 for 36 on the ground. He does add 4 for 32. I mean, Keenan Allen, 11 targets, good, but 5 for 48. Just terrible all around. Like, do you have long-term concerns? I guess let's do it like that. Do you have long-term concerns because people have been relying on these guys to get into the playoffs? Do you have long-term concerns with Herbert, Eckler, or Keenan Allen?
Justin Herbert, with this performance, cost some fantasy managers a chance to get into the playoffs, and that sucks. I mean, this week, or last week, excuse me, was the first week since week 3 that he had finished outside the top 12 quarterbacks.
Yep.
Like, okay, is this performance here based on, okay, are we actually starting to see kind of what we saw at college, based on, or is this Bill Belichick up against a rookie quarterback? Because that track record's impressive. Is that the case? Like, but to be able to put 0 points up on the board, to throw the ball 53 times and you only have 209 passing yards and 2 interceptions, no scores, and you get curb stomped 45-0, like, that is inexcusable. Like, what? Yeah. I'm going to have to go back and watch the film on this one because I legitimately just have no idea what happened.
That's the thing. I was trying to watch it, but it was ridiculous. Yeah, I don't know, man. They get Atlanta next week. Will I rank Herbert as a top 12 quarterback? Almost certainly. Right. Of course, you're starting Keenan Allen, and you'll still start Austin Eckler, but yeah, I don't know. Patriots getting half a point was my favorite bet of the week because I just said this is Bill Belichick and this is going to be a game. But yeah, it's crazy. If you did survive this week with those guys, yeah, you're probably starting them next week and do the best you can.
You had Darren Waller. You had Darren Waller on your roster.
Hopefully you had Darren Waller, right? Exactly, to get you through it, or Devontae Adams or something.
Right.
Thank you, Yates. Thank you for filling in. I know tags appreciate it. You brought the quality of the show way up, as you always do every time you come on. Next time I will take a break and you and tags can just do this, and it'll be even better, my friend, even better. All right, so I think actually it's all three of us on the waiver wire show tomorrow. Yay! It's going to be amazing. We've got some waiver wires. If you did survive the Justin Herbert game, you made your playoffs. We've got a lot of waiver wires to talk about. We will talk about it all tomorrow. Until then, have a pleasant evening if you're listening to this late at night, or rest of your day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Looking for useful content, fantasy relevant information, and the data that's going to help your team win? Then go ahead and subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel. And while you're at it, give us a follow over on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at FantasyPros so you can dominate all your leagues.